30 seconds of absolute silence on live television. Johnny Carson, the man who always had the perfect response, frozen. Lucille Ball, America's queen of comedy, trembling as 3 words hung in the air between them. What she said next would shatter everything the world thought they knew about her. This wasn't about laughter. This was about a secret so devastating that it would leave 40 million viewers in tears. Coming up, you'll discover the hidden tragedy behind Lucy's brightest smile. The moment Johnny Carson realized his friend was dying, and the 3 words that changed television forever. But first, the shocking phone call Lucy received just hours before walking onto that stage. I see messages all the time in the comment section that some of you didn't realize you didn't subscribe. So, if you could do me a favor and double-check if you're a subscriber to this channel, that would be tremendously appreciated. It's simple. It's the free thing that anybody that watches this show frequently can do to help us here, to keep everything going in this show and the trajectory it's on. So please do double-check if you've subscribed. And thank you so much, because in a strange way, you are part of our history, and you're on this journey with us, and I appreciate you for that. November 14th, 1974, 11:31 p.m., NBC Studios, Burbank, California. The Tonight Show band was playing Lucille Ball's entrance music. 300 people in the studio audience were on their feet, applauding before she even appeared. 40 million Americans were settling into their couches, ready to laugh with the woman who had defined television comedy for 2 decades. Johnny Carson stood at his desk, that famous smile ready, his opening joke prepared. Everything was perfect except for one thing. Behind the curtain, Lucille Ball was crying. Not the kind of tears you wipe away before stepping into the spotlight. These were the kind that shake your entire body, the kind that come from a place so deep that no amount of professionalism can contain them. Her makeup artist stood frozen, watching mascara run down the face of the most powerful woman in television. The stage manager kept glancing at his watch, his hand hovering near his headset, ready to signal a delay. But Lucy had never missed an entrance in 40 years of performing. She took one breath, then another. She pressed her trembling hands against her stomach and whispered something that only she could hear. And then she pushed through that curtain and walked into the brightest spotlight in America, carrying a secret that was about to destroy her. What none of those 40 million viewers knew was that 3 hours earlier, Lucy had received a phone call that shattered her world. But that revelation would come later in the most unexpected way possible. The audience erupted as Lucy emerged. Standing ovation, cheers, the kind of love that only legends receive. Johnny walked toward her with open arms, and the moment their hands touched, he felt it. Her hand was ice cold, shaking. He looked into her eyes and saw something that made his practiced smile falter for just a fraction of a second. Terror. But Johnny Carson was a professional. The cameras were rolling. 40 million people were watching, so he guided Lucy to the guest chair, made a joke about her being more popular than the president, and got his laugh. The audience settled. The interview began. For the first 7 minutes, everything seemed normal. Lucy talked about her new CBS special. She shared a story about working with Bob Hope that had the audience in stitches. She did that thing she always did, where she made comedy look effortless, where she made people forget that performing was work. Johnny leaned back in his chair, relaxed, charming, asking all the right questions. But he kept noticing small things, the way Lucy's hands gripped the armrests of her chair, the slight tremor in her voice when she laughed, the way her eyes kept drifting to something off-camera, as if she was looking for an escape route. And then Johnny asked the question that changed everything. He leaned forward, his voice warm and genuine. "Lucy, after all these incredible years, after everything you've accomplished, what's the one thing in your life that you're most grateful for?" It was supposed to be an easy question, a softball, the kind of question every talk show host asks, and every guest has a rehearsed answer for. Lucy could have said her career, her fans, her legacy. She could have kept it light and moved on to the next topic. Her smile disappeared. Her hands began to shake visibly. And for 3 full seconds, Lucille Ball, the woman who had made 60 million people laugh every week for 20 years, couldn't speak at all. The studio audience sensed something was wrong. The laughter died. Johnny's expression shifted from professional warmth to genuine concern. And in that moment of silence, you could hear the cameras moving, the air conditioning humming, someone in the back row clearing their throat. Lucy looked down at her hands, then back up at Johnny. And when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Johnny, Can I tell you something I've never told anyone publicly? But what happened next shocked everyone in that studio, because Lucy's secret wasn't what anyone expected. Johnny Carson had interviewed presidents and movie stars and the biggest celebrities in the world. He had handled awkward moments with grace. He had navigated controversial topics with perfect timing. In 12 years of hosting The Tonight Show, he had never been caught off guard. Until now. "Of course, Lucy," he said, his voice gentle. "Anything." Lucy took a shaky breath. The camera zoomed in slowly, capturing every detail of her face, the makeup that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion. The eyes that had sparkled with mischief for 4 decades, but now looked haunted by something deeper. "I'm dying," she said. 3 words, just 3 words. But they landed in that studio like a bomb. The audience gasped. Someone in the front row covered their mouth. Johnny's face went pale. Ed McMahon, sitting at his desk off to the side, stood up without realizing he was doing it. "The cancer," Lucy continued, her voice cracking. "The doctors give me maybe 2 weeks, but Johnny, that's not what I need to say." She wiped her eyes roughly, smearing her mascara. Her whole body was trembling now, and 40 million Americans watching from their living rooms leaned closer to their television sets, not quite believing what they were hearing. "I need to talk about Desi, the second bomb." The audience's gasp was even louder this time. Lucy and Desi Arnaz's divorce had been Hollywood legend. They had created the most successful show in television history together, then destroyed each other in one of the most bitter divorces of the 1960s. Lucy never spoke about it publicly. Never. For 14 years she had deflected every question about Desi with a practiced smile and a change of subject. But now, with nothing left to lose, she was ready to tell the truth. "Everyone thinks I left Desi because of his drinking," Lucy said, tears streaming freely down her face now. "His infidelity, his gambling, and all of that was true. He did all those things." She looked directly at Johnny, her eyes desperate for him to understand. "But that's not why our marriage really ended." Johnny leaned forward, his professional composure completely gone. He wasn't a talk show host anymore. He was just a friend, watching someone he cared about fall apart. "I destroyed our marriage, Johnny. Not him. Me." And that's when Lucy said the 3 words that would make Johnny Carson go completely silent for 30 seconds on live television. But first, we need to understand what those words meant. To understand what Lucy was about to reveal, you have to go back to 1960, the year everything fell apart. I Love Lucy had been the biggest show in television history. At its peak, more Americans watched Lucy Ricardo get into trouble than watched presidential inaugurations. When Lucy gave birth to little Ricky on the show, 44 million people tuned in. That was more viewers than watched the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. Lucy and Desi had built an empire together. Desilu Productions, the first production company owned by a married couple. They were worth millions. They were famous. They were powerful. And they were miserable. Behind the scenes, their marriage was collapsing. Desi's drinking had gotten worse. His gambling debts were mounting. And yes, there were other women. Many other women. Lucy knew about all of it. She pretended not to, but she knew. In late 1959, Desi did something unexpected. He sat Lucy down in their home in Palm Springs and made her an offer. "Let's quit," he said. "Let's walk away from all of it. Let's just be a family. Watch our kids grow up, travel, live." Lucy had stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Quit the show?" she asked. "Quit everything we've built?" "Yes," Desi said. "Because none of it matters if we lose each other." What Desi didn't know was that I Love Lucy wasn't just a show to Lucy. It was her identity. It was her worth. It was proof that a woman from a small town in upstate New York could become the most famous person in America. The thought of walking away from it terrified her more than anything. So she said, "No, not maybe. Not let me think about it. Just no." Desi filed for divorce 6 months later. Now 14 years later, sitting across from Johnny Carson on live television, Lucy was finally admitting the truth she'd been running from all that time. But what she said next would leave everyone speechless. Lucy's voice dropped to almost a whisper. The studio had gone so quiet you could hear the cameras moving. "Desi died in 1986, she said, 3 years ago. And you know what his last words to me were?" Johnny shook his head slowly. He looked like he was bracing himself for impact. "I visited him in the hospital 2 days before he died," Lucy continued. "He was weak, could barely speak, but he took my hand and he said, She stopped. Tears were streaming down her face. Her whole body was shaking, and for a moment it looked like she might not be able to continue. He said, "Lucy, I never stopped loving you, not for one single day." The studio erupted in sobs, not polite sniffles, full body shaking sobs. Women in the audience were holding each other. Men were wiping their eyes. The camera operators were crying behind their cameras. Johnny Carson's eyes were glistening with tears, but he didn't look away from Lucy. He just held her gaze, letting her know without words that he was there, that he understood, that she could say whatever she needed to say. And I realized, Lucy gasped between sobs, that I had thrown away the love of my life for what? For a TV show? For people to know my name. She looked directly at Johnny, and then passed him into the camera, speaking to every single person watching. "Desi is gone. My children barely know me because I was always working. I have 3 Emmy Awards, and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and I would trade every single one of them for one more day with the man I loved." The weight of those words settled over the studio like a heavy blanket. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a woman standing at the end of her life, looking back at the choice that had defined everything, and realizing it had been the wrong one. But Lucy wasn't finished. The most devastating part was still coming. Johnny moved his chair closer to Lucy and took her hand. The cameras captured it all. The gesture was so simple, so human, that it made the moment even more powerful. "Lucy," he said gently, "you don't have to do this." But Lucy shook her head. "Yes, I do, because in 8 days I'll be gone, and if I don't say this now, I'll die with this regret eating me alive." She took a shaky breath and continued. "Desi asked me to quit the show. Not at the beginning, but later. After our son was born, he begged me. He said, 'Lucy, we have enough money. Let's just be a family. Let's watch our kids grow up. Let's travel. Let's live.'" The studio was so quiet now that you could hear the air conditioning humming. "And I said, no," Lucy whispered. "I said no because I loved the fame more than I loved him. I loved the applause more than I loved our family. I chose being Lucy Ricardo over being Lucy Arnaz, and it destroyed everything." Johnny was openly crying now, not even trying to hide it. Several audience members were sobbing. Ed McMahon had his face in his hands. And then, Lucy said the 3 words. She looked directly at Johnny Carson, her eyes red and swollen, her voice breaking. "I chose wrong." 3 words, simple, devastating, true. And Johnny Carson, the man who always had the perfect response, the man who had interviewed thousands of celebrities over 30 years. The man who never lost his composure on camera, went completely silent. 30 seconds of absolute silence on live television. He didn't crack a joke to lighten the mood. He didn't offer platitudes about how Lucy had brought joy to millions. He didn't do any of the things a professional talk show host was supposed to do. He just sat there holding her hand, crying with her, letting the weight of those 3 words sink in. Because what do you say to someone who just admitted they chose fame over love, success over family, and realized too late that they had made the biggest mistake of their life? What happened next would become the most replayed moment in Tonight Show history. The silence stretched. 15 seconds, 20, 25. The producers in the control room were panicking. Fred Dordova was frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing something that had never happened in the history of late-night television. Finally, at the 30-second mark, Johnny spoke. His voice was thick with emotion. "Lucy, Desi knew you loved him. I promise you he knew." Lucy looked at him with the desperate hope of someone drowning, reaching for anything to hold on to. "How can you be sure?" "Because love like that doesn't disappear just because people get divorced. Johnny said he waited for you. He loved you until his last breath. Trust me. He knew." "Lucy, trust me, he knew." Lucy nodded, unable to speak. She looked out at the audience, then back at the camera, addressing the 40 million people watching. "Please," she said, her voice from crying. "Please don't make my mistake. Go home tonight. Tell the people you love that they matter more than anything. Hug your children, hold your spouse, choose them. Choose love. Always choose love." The audience stood as one. They weren't applauding, they were witnessing something sacred. The ovation went on for 3 full minutes while Lucy sobbed. But what America didn't know was that Lucy's revelation would trigger something unexpected. Something that would change how millions of people live their lives. And it started with a single phone call. When the show cut to commercial, Johnny Carson did something unprecedented. He looked at his producer through the camera and said, "Fred, we're throwing out the rest of the show tonight. Cancel the other guests. This is more important." The other scheduled guest for the evening, a popular singer and a comedian, were quietly told their segments were canceled. Nobody complained. They understood. Johnny turned back to Lucy. "I want you to tell America what Desi really meant to you, not as Lucille Ball, the star, as Lucy the woman. Can you do that?" Lucy nodded, wiping her eyes with the handkerchief Johnny had quietly pressed into her hand. And for the next 8 minutes, Lucille Ball did something she had never done in her entire career. She stopped performing and started being real. She talked about the day she met Desi at a dinner party in 1940, how he had made her laugh for the first time in months, how he had asked for her phone number without knowing who she was. She talked about their wedding in 1940, how small and private it had been, how Desi had written his own vows and made her cry before they even got to the altar. She talked about the small things, the way Desi made her coffee every morning exactly the way she liked it, the way he rubbed her feet after long days on set, the way he never once made her feel like she had to be Lucille Ball, the legend, instead of Lucy the person. "He gave me permission to be ordinary," Lucy said, "and you have no idea how extraordinary that is when the whole world expects you to be amazing every single second." The audience was weeping. Men who had never cried in public were wiping their eyes. Women were holding hands with strangers in the seats next to them. Johnny let Lucy speak without interruption. He didn't try to guide the conversation or make jokes or do any of the things a talk show host normally does. He simply listened. The way a friend listens when someone they care about is hurting. But what Lucy revealed next would shock everyone even more. "Do you know what I did 2 weeks after Desi died?" Lucy asked Johnny. He shook his head. "I went to his house, our old house where we lived when we were happy. And I stood in the driveway and I screamed at the sky. I screamed, why didn't I say yes? Why didn't I just say yes when he asked me to choose him?" She covered her face with her hands, her voice muffled. "I've had 3 years to think about this. 3 years of waking up every morning knowing I made the worst decision of my life. And now I'm dying and I can't fix it. I can't go back. I can't tell Desi I'm sorry. I can't tell him he was right. I can't tell him that every single award, every magazine cover, every moment of fame meant absolutely nothing compared to losing him." Johnny couldn't speak. He just held her hand and cried with her. "The note before Desi died," Lucy continued, her voice barely audible. "He told me something else. He said, 'Lucy, don't make our mistake. Tell people, tell everyone, choose love, choose family. Don't let them choose fame over what matters.'" She looked up at Johnny with devastated eyes. "He made me promise, and I've been too much of a coward to keep that promise until now." Lucy turned to face the camera directly, addressing the 20 million people still watching. "I'm telling you this because some of you are making the same mistake right now. You're choosing your career over your family. You're choosing everything that doesn't matter over the only thing that does." Her voice broke completely. "Does he? And I created the most successful show in television history. We had everything, and I threw it away because I was afraid that if I stopped performing, people would forget about me. Well, guess what? They will forget about me. In 50 years, maybe 100, nobody will care about I Love Lucy, but Desi would have loved me forever. My children would have had a mother, and I wouldn't be sitting here dying and alone with nothing but regrets." The studio erupted, not in applause, but in sobs. Grown men were weeping openly. Women in the audience were holding each other. Johnny Carson put his face in his hands and cried like he'd never cried on television before. And then something completely spontaneous happened that would become television legend. Johnny Carson stood up, walked around his desk, and sat on the couch next to Lucy. He put his arm around her shoulders while she cried into his jacket. The cameras kept rolling, capturing one of the most intimate moments in television history. The audience stood as one. They weren't applauding, they were witnessing, honoring, grieving with her. When Lucy finally lifted her head, Johnny handed her his handkerchief. "Lucy," he said softly, "Desi knew you loved him. I promise you he knew." "How can you be sure?" she asked, her voice like a child's. "Because love like that doesn't disappear just because people get divorced. Johnny said he waited for you. He loved you until his last breath. He knew, Lucy. Trust me, he knew." Lucy nodded, unable to speak. She looked out at the audience, then back at the camera. "Please," she said, her voice raw from crying. "Please don't make my mistake. Go home tonight. Tell the people you love that they matter more than anything. Hug your children. Hold your spouse. Choose them. Choose love. Always choose love. Johnny helped her stand. As they walked toward the stage exit, Lucy stopped and turned back one last time. And Johnny, thank you for letting me tell the truth. 8 days later, on April 26, 1989, Lucille Ball died of a heart attack. She was 77 years old. But what happened after her death proved she was right about everything. And it started with a flood of letters that nobody expected. The response to Lucy's final interview was unprecedented. NBC received over 400,000 letters in the following month. But these weren't fan letters. They were confessions, promises, stories of lives changed. A man in Ohio wrote that he had been planning to work through his daughter's birthday. After watching Lucy, he called his boss and took the day off. A woman in Texas wrote that she and her husband had been separated for 6 months. They reconciled the next day. A father in Florida wrote that he hadn't spoken to his son in 3 years. He picked up the phone that night. Hundreds of letters came from people who said they had been choosing their careers over their families. Lucy's breakdown had given them permission to choose differently. Mental health professionals reported something remarkable. In the weeks following the broadcast, counseling centers across the country saw a surge in couples seeking help. Not because their marriages were ending, but because they wanted to save them before it was too late. Johnny Carson spoke at Lucy's funeral. His voice was steady, but his eyes were red. She spent 40 years making us laugh, he said. But in her final interview, she gave us something more valuable than laughter. She gave us permission to admit our regrets. She gave us the courage to choose differently. She saved marriages. She brought families together. That was Lucy's real legacy. The woman in the front row, Lucy's daughter Lucy Arnaz, was crying. So was Lucy's son, Desi Arnaz Jr. They had both been there that night watching from backstage as their mother finally told the truth she had been hiding for decades. After the funeral, Lucy approached Johnny. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for letting her say what she needed to say." Johnny hugged her. "Your mother was the bravest person I ever met. Not because she was funny, because in the end, she was honest. But the true impact of that night wouldn't be fully understood for years. Because Lucy's 3 words, 'I chose wrong,' would echo far beyond that one broadcast. Today, that interview is preserved in the Library of Congress. It's shown in marriage counseling sessions, business ethics classes, and grief therapy groups across the country. Marriage counselors use the clip to help couples understand the long-term cost of choosing career over family. One therapist in California said, "When people see Lucille Ball, one of the most successful women in history, saying she would trade it all for love, it changes how they think about their own choices." Business schools use it to teach about the hidden costs of ambition. A professor at Harvard said, "We teach students how to be successful. Lucy taught them what success actually means." Grief counselors use it to help people process regret. A therapist in New York said, "Lucy gave people permission to admit they made the wrong choice. That's incredibly powerful. Most people die without ever being that honest." The clip has been viewed over 50 million times across every platform imaginable. It appears in documentaries about television history. It's studied in film schools. It consistently ranks on lists of the most emotional moments ever broadcast. But more importantly, it continues to change lives. Every year, thousands of people write letters or post comments saying that Lucy's interview made them reevaluate their priorities. They quit jobs they hated. They moved closer to family. They stopped missing their kids' games. They put down their phones during dinner. They chose love because Lucy had shown them what happens when you don't. Johnny Carson referenced that night for the rest of his life. In his final interview before his own death in 2005, he said something that captures everything. "Lucy changed me. She taught me that every conversation matters. Every moment you choose to show up for someone to really see them might be the moment that saves their life. And you'll probably never know it. But that's okay. That's more than okay. That's everything." But there's one more part of the story that almost nobody knows, and it reveals just how deeply that night affected Johnny Carson. 3 months after Lucy died, Johnny Carson did something he had never done in 30 years of hosting The Tonight Show. He dedicated an entire episode to reading letters from viewers who had changed their lives because of Lucy's interview. He read a letter from a woman who had quit her job to care for her dying mother. He read a letter from a man who had reconciled with his estranged son. He read a letter from a couple who had canceled their divorce. And then Johnny read one more letter. This one was different. It was from a woman named Margaret Thompson, a 68-year-old widow from Iowa. She wrote, "Dear Mr. Carson, I watched Lucy's interview with my husband of 45 years. 3 days later, he had a massive heart attack. He survived, but the doctors said it was close. While he was recovering in the hospital, I told him something I had never said in 45 years of marriage. I told him that he was the best choice I ever made, that I would choose him again every single day. He cried, I cried, and I realized that Lucy had given me a gift. She taught me not to wait until it's too late to say what matters." Johnny's voice cracked as he read that letter on air. He looked directly into the camera and said, "Mrs. Thompson, thank you for writing, and thank you for not waiting." He paused, gathering himself. Lucy spent 40 years making us laugh, but what she did in her final interview was more important than any comedy routine. She showed us that success without love is just an expensive way to be lonely. She showed us that fame without family is just a crowd of strangers who don't really know you. She showed us that all the awards in the world don't matter if you're dying alone with regrets. Johnny sat down the letter and looked straight into the camera, speaking directly to every person watching. Don't make Lucy's mistake. Don't wait until you're dying to tell people you love them. Don't wait until it's too late to choose differently. The people who love you, they won't remember your job title. They won't remember your bank account. They'll remember whether you showed up, whether you chose them, whether you made them feel like they mattered. The studio audience stood and applauded, not because it was entertaining, because it was true. And in that moment, Johnny Carson completed the mission Lucy had given him that night. He made sure her message reached everyone who needed to hear it. But the story doesn't end there. Here's what most people don't realize about that November night in 1970. Lucy wasn't just confessing her regrets. She was giving every person watching permission to be honest about their own. We live in a world that tells us success is everything. Work harder, climb higher, make more money, get more famous, achieve more. And somewhere along the way, we forget to ask the most important question: what are we sacrificing to get there? Lucy sacrificed love for fame, and it destroyed her. But her honesty saved millions of people from making the same mistake. Think about your own life right now. What are you choosing? What are you sacrificing? Are you missing your kids' games because of meetings? Are you skipping family dinners because of work? Are you too busy climbing the ladder to notice the people you love are slipping away? Lucy would tell you to stop right now. Stop and choose differently. Because here's the truth she learned too late. Every single award, every promotion, every moment of success will eventually fade. But love, real love, the kind that shows up every day, that's what lasts. That's what matters when you're lying in a hospital bed, looking back at your life. That's why he sat there in silence for 30 seconds. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply witness someone's pain. Simply be present. Simply let them know they're not alone. And that's what Lucy needed in that moment. Not jokes, not platitudes, just someone to hold her hand while she told the truth. 8 days after that interview, Lucy died. But because she was brave enough to admit her biggest regret, millions of people changed their lives. They chose love over fame, family over fortune, presence over success. They chose right. And that's Lucy's real legacy. Not I Love Lucy, not the Emmy Awards, not the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Her legacy is every person who watched that interview and decided to go home and hug their kids. Every person who called a loved one they hadn't spoken to in years. Every person who chose love when the world told them to choose success. That's what those 3 words, "I chose wrong," really meant. They meant don't be me, don't wait, don't make my mistake. Choose love, choose family, choose the people who will still be there when the cameras stop rolling and the applause fades and success doesn't feel so important anymore. Choose right. If this story moved you, if Lucy's words hit you somewhere deep, then do something about it today. Call someone you love, tell them they matter. Hug your kids, hold your spouse, choose them over your phone, over your work, over everything that seems urgent but isn't really important. Because one day you'll be the one looking back at your life, and the question won't be how successful you were, it'll be how much you loved and how well you showed it. Don't wait until it's too late. Lucy spent 40 years making America laugh, but in her final interview, she gave us something more valuable than laughter. She gave us the truth. And the truth is simple. Love is all that matters. Everything else is just noise. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful true stories about the moments that changed television and touched hearts forever. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that it's okay to choose love over success. That showing up for the people you care about is more important than any career achievement. And leave a comment below. Tell me, what choice are you making today? Are you choosing love, or are you choosing what the world tells you matters? Because Lucy's story proves that at the end of your life, only one of those choices will matter. Choose love. Always choose love, the way Lucy wished she would.